things that happened while I was in Phoenix is my cell phone died. It's the one that we've used to do all the recordings because it has phenomenal video and memory and whatever. And so I have a new cell phone and we're trying it out, and I'm going to have to adjust some of the settings, I guess, on the recording because I've run out of memory on the card already. While Craig was reading it, ran out of memory, and I had to go and shift it to now it's saving on the phone itself. So I don't know how long it'll last, but challenges come, right? What was interesting is the day that my phone died was the day I was getting ready to go to my high school reunion. I'm not telling you how many years, no. Longer than I imagined or thought, you know. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And my parents have been moved from the Phoenix area proper to Mesa, which is kind of it's like a 30-minute drive on freeways. It didn't exist when I lived there. So it's like, you know, I'm going on these roads I don't recognize, don't know, they didn't exist, and I had my cell phone and it's wonderful GPS, and I got to where I could go from my parents' house out to the Mesa, out to their new home, easily and quickly, and it was nice. It's still 30 minutes, but at least I wasn't worried about where am I at. So I'm out in Mesa, and my phone just is rotated. It won't start, it won't open, it won't do what I need it to do, and I need to go to North Mountain, which is on the other side of Phoenix. And I know it's way on the other side of Phoenix. And I'm not exactly sure where North Mountain Park is, but if I get my GPS to work, I'll be fine. Except it won't work. So my sister gave me directions. Okay, I can follow directions. So then I get in the car and I start driving, and I go to get on the highway where I normally get on, and the road's closed. Not only is it closed, but I know that if I go on beyond, there's no real way to turn around. So it's like, okay, fine, I'll just get on the highway going the other way, and then I can get off and come around back, right? So I get on the highway going the other way, get off to turn around and come back, and there's very confusing directions the whole time I'm watching my phone. Rotated screen. It won't start. It won't turn on. Like, I turn it off, I restart, I turn it off, I restart it. Then I couldn't get it even to turn off. It wouldn't respond to anything. It just kept rotating the starting screen, the very first thing that comes up when you start your phone. And so here it's rotating and rotating and rotating, and it's like, and I'm lost. And I'm like, how do Lord, help! I did get to the reunion. I did figure, you know, I stopped and I prayed and I said, Lord, you've got to show me. And I started seeing signs that I hadn't seen. I'd driven back and forth 3 times trying to figure out how to get on the stupid freeway that I'd gotten off of, and I knew there was a way to do it, but it's like, where's my, you know. So I'm able to get back on. I'm able to go home and change and get ready, and I'm able to find the park, and all of this. It's like, Lord, why the challenge? Why is it so hard? Do you ever notice before God does something big, it makes it hard for you? Somehow or another it gets hard. I don't know if that's God that does that. I really shouldn't have said it that way. I should say the enemy loves to jump in and things start getting hard. And sometimes I think that's how God tests us and our perseverance. Have I not said to you? Did I not tell you? And I honestly, this is going to sound funny, but I believed that God wanted me to go to that reunion, and I didn't know why. Didn't think I'd remember anybody. Didn't think anybody would remember me, really. I was kind of a nobody in high school. I was kind of a quiet person at my school. I kind of sat in the background, didn't do a whole lot. I mean, I did some things, but I didn't think anybody would know me, and I wasn't sure if anybody would be there that I knew, because most of the people that I have maintained a relationship with weren't going to be there. And I thought, okay, well, but I know you said to go. Okay, so I'm going to go. It was hard. I got there. First 20 minutes or so, I'm like, I don't even know why I'm here. This is just bizarre. This is strange. Someone came over and talked to me, someone that I knew from church contacts. She had married someone that was in my graduating class. So we had a nice little conversation. And then someone else came over and talked to me a little bit. And as I'm walking around, all of a sudden a gal looks at me and she picks up my, she goes, is that? And she says, that's the Star of David. Yes, it is. And that's in Azusa, yes. Oh, you're Messianic, yes! And she gives me this big hug. Now, this is a person I've never met. I know I've never met her because she married someone that I went to school with. And they've only been married a couple of years. And so, she hugs me, and then we had about an hour and a half a conversation about what it's like to be a Gentile following a Jewish God. And I went, you know what, Lord? If for no other reason I was here to encourage her, she was here to encourage me. Because, it's kind of hard being away from what you know and what you do and participating in other people and doing the way things other people do things and not having your own place. And it was a breath of fresh air to talk with her, to share with her the joy of following after the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even being a Gentile. And as I was driving home, I thought, Lord, that's why I was there. I'm glad I persevered. I'm glad I pushed through. I'm glad I pushed through. I really didn't visit with anybody I knew. It wasn't one of those, great big wonderful fun days. It was just was. But I had an opportunity to connect with someone and a level of encouragement that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't gone. God ever told you to do something and then it got hard? Yeah. God told us when we first moved into a house, that building, that's your church. And I'd gotten to the point I thought maybe I didn't hear right. And that's not a heard right. Oh well, Lord, if you open it up, you open it up. Whatever, right? God's opening it up. I think, honestly, as we read the story of the patriarchs, as we read about Abraham and the promise that God had made to him, you will have a son. About Sarah laughing, I can actually understand that now in ways I didn't understand when I was younger. Why would Sarah laugh at that? Well, yeah, we're going to have that church building. Sure. Yeah, God's good. You know what, guys? God will do what God has promised. But it may not be in our time or in our understanding. And sometimes it doesn't even look like what we think it's going to look like. I knew I was supposed to go to the reunion. I knew I was supposed to meet somebody. But I thought it was for something totally different. It didn't look the same. But as I'm driving away, I knew that was what God was doing. I have a new phone now. I do not like learning new technology. It is extremely frustrating. Oh, this is just like your other phone. Yeah, really? I don't think so. It's very close in some areas, but not in all. And so then there's this frustration of, now I got to learn this new phone. I'm in Arizona. I'm in Phoenix. Persevere. Keep doing. Someone asked me once, how do you know God's perfect will for your life? I said, it's very simple. Do the next right thing. Do the next right thing, and you will be walking in God's will for your life. Whatever the next right thing is. It doesn't have to be this complicated, God gave me this vision thing. It's do the next right thing. If God wants to show you 10 paces in advance, that's good, He maybe will, but my God has never shown me too far in advance because He knows I jump ship. Sometimes I look at it and I go, what are you doing, God? But if we'll do the next right thing, He'll get us where we need to be. Doing the things we need to do. In the story of Abraham and Sarah, there's a lot of challenges, aren't there? If this foreign king had taken Sarah and kept her, then whose son would Isaac have been? But the king does not. Because God stopped it. Even when we do things wrong, Sarah and Abraham, you really think Abraham was right to tell the king Abimelech that this is my sister? It showed a kind of lack of faith, didn't it? Doesn't it? God can't protect your wife. You're going to lie in order to protect yourself, your life. God can't protect you there. So even with a lack of faith, even when we do things that really aren't exactly right, God still can and will intervene if our lives are surrendered to Him. God can and will intervene. He will do what He needs to do. Would it be better if we obeyed Him fully? Absolutely. Then there'd never be any doubt. But sometimes we do things that are not exactly the way God wanted. And God has to do something for us when we're not looking. But God is still a good God, and he made a promise. And he promised Abraham he would have a son. And he promised Abraham he would have a son through Sarah. And even though all these things came about to challenge it, God still saw it through. So there are challenges, there are hard things. Sometimes I feel like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Well, what's the next right thing? Do that. Don't lie about your wife, right? Don't do the next wrong thing. Do the next right thing. But even if we mess up, if we stay surrendered to God, if you are chosen by him, he's still going to make it work. Ishmael. To me, the whole thing about Ishmael and Hagar is very sad. I always felt sorry for Hagar. And I felt sorry for Ishmael. At the same time, I know that God was using even them. And God had made a promise to Abraham before Ishmael was born, your descendants will be like the stars in the sky. I will make a great nation out of your descendants. God made that promise before Hagar was given to Abram. So we look at it this way, Ishmael, because he is one of Abram's sons, even if not by the woman of promise, even if by Hagar, God still said, I will make him a great nation, because he's Abraham's seed. Is he the seed of promise? No. Has it been a problem for generation after generation after generation after generation, as Ishmael's children are still fighting today for the attention that Ishmael wanted then? Why did Ishmael make fun of Isaac? Abram circumcised Isaac, and it's a beautiful thing. But as Isaac is weaned, which was probably about 3 years old, anywhere between 3 and 5 in that culture, they have a feast. Ishmael makes fun of him. It just doesn't go over well, and Sarah says, get rid of those two. But God still was faithful, even to Ishmael and Hagar, because they were connected to the man of promise. God is still faithful. God is still God. God is going to do, and he's going to see it through. God comes to Abram and says, now I want you to take your son and sacrifice him. There's big theological arguments over whether or not God meant him to do it. If God said to you, go sacrifice your son, please verify it with other people, okay? Don't go do it. That is not the norm. This is a very unusual event here. God doesn't say kill our children. In fact, human sacrifice is something God abhors. He hates it. So why would God say, take your son and go up and offer him as a sacrifice? I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Theologically, there's all kinds of arguments all the way around. What I do know is this: God tested Abraham's faith with it, and Abraham believed God's promise. Even if he were to slay his son, he believed God's promise. And God stopped him, didn't he? God took care of it. The very first use of the word that we translate of worship is used here. Where he says to the men, in chapter 22, verse 5, it says, Abraham said to the young men, sit down here with the donkey. As for me as the young man, we will go over there, worship, and return to you. That's the first use of the word worship in the Bible, in Torah. Worship. And it's equated with giving up your dream, giving up the promise, letting it go, slaying that promise before God, and trusting that God will raise it up, that God will take care of it. We think of worship as singing a few songs, right? Worship is when we lay ourselves and our hearts out before God. And as Abraham is going up with his son, who, by the way, was not a son, he was probably 22 years old, anywhere between 16 and 25. He's a young man now. He's not a little boy. When Abram binds him and puts him up on the altar, he's binding someone who could fight back. You think about that, what Isaac thought. He could have fought back. But this is worship. Taking that promise that God gave, knowing God's going to fulfill it, and laying it back down before him and letting it go. That's worship. And when we do that before God, he is always, always, always faithful. And he provides. When we lay the promise down, then he provides. He brought in a ram. Remember at Rosh Hashanah I talked about why a ram's horn and what the ram's horn is, and how is it that blowing a ram's horn confuses the enemy? Because you see, from this passage it's believed that the ram that was sacrificed, which represents the Messiah to come, that ram's horn is the horn of Messiah, and when Messiah comes he will blow it. So every time we blow the horn, we blow the shofar, the enemy's going, is it now? Is it now? Is it now? Is it now? Am I defeated yet? You see, the enemy knows he's defeated eventually, but he wants to take as many casualties as he can with him. His army's not really retreating. He just wants as much casualty as he can get. But when we blow the ram's horn, when we declare the promise of God, when we declare the sacrifice of God, when we declare that we have sacrificed ourselves and God is God, that's when the enemy's defeated. He's defeated in our lives when we do that. He is defeated when we live that, not when we blow the shofar. That's just a representation of it. But when we live that sacrificial life, that life of worship, God provided the ram, did he not? He did that in many ways. He does that at many times. As we continue reading the lives of the patriarchs, we're going to see other things, other times where the patriarchs did right, the patriarchs did wrong. The patriarchs trusted God, the patriarchs did not trust God. We're going to read about all kinds of different people doing all kinds of strange things. Because people are people. We read about Lot and his family and the insanity that was there and the shameful birth of the nations that followed after Lot and his daughters. And that's about the shame of the birth of those nations. And we look at all of these stories, and there's so many things we could argue about, we could look at, we could go into detail. And people do that, and it could be fun, it could be great discussion. But if we miss the main point, then we've missed everything. Because you see, in the Brit Hadassah, the apostolic writings, it says, these things are written that we might learn, that we might know. These things are written as an example to us. Some are good examples, some are not good examples. Abraham is a good example most of the time. Lying about his wife is not a good example. But an example is an example, is it not? So we want to look at these lives, we want to learn from them. We want to understand the main thing. Abraham was counted righteous because Abraham believed God. And he acted on that belief. See, it's one thing to believe in our heads, and it's another thing to believe in our hearts, and it's still another thing to put it both together and act on our belief. See, our belief, our thinking is nothing without our action. Action without faith is nothing as well, and it works together. And in Abraham we find an example of action from faith. And then we see how God responds to action from faith. Do you want God's response to you to be the same? Do you want that promise fulfilled? Do you know it was God's promise? Sometimes we want things and it wasn't necessarily a promise, it's what we wanted. Are we willing to lay it down? And if God slays it, then God slays it, and trust that God will do the best anyway, right? Sometimes we lay a promise or what we believe is a promise of God down, and it literally dies and it stays dead. But the question is, was it a promise or was it what I wanted? Or was it a promise that was conditional upon other things? You see, if God has made an absolute promise to you, He will absolutely keep it. But we, in our faith and in our trust, have to be absolutely willing to lay it down. Then when he resurrects it, when he takes care of it, then we know for sure it is directly of him. Always. Always of him. It's not always easy getting where you think God wants you to be. Sometimes there are challenges. Sometimes you get lost on the freeway. Sometimes your cell phone GPS doesn't work and you have no idea how to get there and you have to find another way to do it. Sometimes it's just like a piece of cake. You just walk and do the next right thing and it just da-da-da-da and it works. But however it is, I still know that God is faithful. I still trust that God is the God of the promise and God is the one who will keep the promise. And I can trust him. I can argue with him like Abraham did. Abraham argued with him, right? He argued with him for the life of his nephew and that whole family. God honored Abraham. That's a form of prayer. But when God said to Abraham, lay down your son, he didn't argue with him. He said, yes, Lord. There's a place in our faith and in our walk that when God reveals something to us, we argue with it, we let him know, we talk about it, we discuss it with him. When God gives us a direct command, we need to obey it. There's a lot of things been going on. You've paid attention to the news at all, you see that there's still fights on Temple Mount. You see that there's things happening in Israel today that weren't happening 2 months ago. You see a renewed urge by the sons of Ishmael to have priority and preeminence. I saw yesterday morning that American troops are going into Syria. Not many, but a few. Doesn't matter how many. Things are happening in the world around us that are just more signs that God's fulfillment of his ultimate promise is at hand. It's coming. It's soon. Soon and very soon. Between now and then, I just want to trust him, do the next right thing. When he gives me a direct command, I want to obey it. When he shows me something that he's going to do, and he's engaging me in this conversation, like he did with Abram, where he talks about what he was going to do with Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham says, well, for the sake of this many would you destroy it? And Abraham bargains with God with what he's doing. That's called intercession. And you know, as we see things happening, as we see the world coming, as we see different catastrophes, we can intercede. That huge storm that was supposed to hit Mexico, did you know how quickly that dissipated? Yes, there was still loss of life. There was still some hard things. But the people of God saw it, raised up, and all through Mexico there was demand and there was a rising up to prayer. And the people of God in Mexico prayed. And several people here prayed, God, in your judgment, remember mercy. Be merciful to Mexico. Be merciful when the storm hits. Be merciful, God, be merciful. And the storm just kind of went, shh. And instead of being that, I don't even know what it was called, but it was one of the largest storms ever in this hemisphere. One of the hardest, the highest winds. And it became a tropical storm, which can still be hard, but it wasn't what it started as. By the time it hit landfall, God heard his people, I believe. There was one meteorologist that said, that was strange. That was strange. That was God. I believe in answering people who prayed and cried out and said, Lord, please, mercy, mercy, mercy. So when we see these things, we need to pray. We need to call out. We need to ask. There still will be times that judgment hits. And I don't think it's going to be that pretty. And it's not always going to have the mercy. But no matter what, God is still going to be God, and he's still going to be faithful. He's still going to see the promise fulfilled. We're still going to see a king in Israel named Yeshua. And it will be soon. God himself provided the ram. God himself will provide the king. God himself will fulfill his promise. between now and then, let's just keep doing the next right thing. Let's keep following after. Let's keep obeying. And when he speaks a word of promise to you, hold on to it. Cherish it. Nourish it. Trust it. Don't try to do it yourself. Let God take care of it. Father, I thank you that you are a good God and that you have a good word and that you have so much you have taught us. And I ask that your blessings would be upon your word, and that if anything I spoke is just of me, that it would fall to the ground. But what is of you, Lord, let it bear fruit in your day and in your season. Father, I love you and I thank you for all that you have given us and all that you have done. And I'm so grateful to be back here. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, our Lord and our Savior.